Welcome to the Movie Vault. I'm Ben.
Politics are going crazy these days.
So true, Zach.
And I'm Zach. And welcome. Today we're going to review the Elephant Man.
You really never know with Zach what direction he's going to take things in. You really don't know.
What year was this movie?
This is a 1980 movie directed by none other than David Lynch, who, of course, the series is based on. And it stars Anthony Hopkins, John Hurt, and some other people,
etc. Now, even though politics are going crazy these days, and it's an interesting time to be an American, to be an Earth citizen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think one day we will need citizenship for Earth?
I would say it's definitely a possibility.
Yes. Even though it's very possible that we'll have to do that one day, this still stands as a great movie.
And nothing will ever change that.
Nothing. Ever. Nothing will ever change that.
You know why why... Now I'm going back into
Do you know why?
You know when I edit my videos now, I'll start saying something and I won't like how I say it, and I'll just stop because then I'll give myself a pause so I can edit it out.
Can I ask you,
I'm not going to do that on the podcast, but I can't get in the habit of I stuttered over my word. Now I'm going to pause.
Well,
take
this
a
is
5
more
second
raw,
break.
you know?
Yeah, it is more raw.
And also, you had that one mean comment. You know you can do more than one take.
I learned. I hope those people saw my other videos and saw how much I learned. But I think it's hilarious because that's still the only stranger who's commented on my video. Maybe it was somebody I knew who was trolling me.
It wasn't me.
Big old troll.
It wasn't me.
No, but I appreciate that person's constructive criticism. It did help me in the future. But I was saying everyone's stories that I've heard about this movie, like several people that I've listened to podcasts and stuff and read reviews about this movie have said, my dad really liked this. My mom really liked this.
Sean Fennessy, you're talking about. Because
Sean,
I read his review.
Yep, Sean Fennessy comes to mind, but also on the Blank Check podcast.
We were just on the same wavelength. We read the same reviews.
We read the same reviews. We listened to the same podcasts.
Wow.
We are not a podcast that exclusively retains your attention. We want you to listen to and engage with other stuff. And yes, we know the more popular podcasts, they have better production value, and you might learn more from them, but you won't get the same dynamic you get.
Are they raw?
Are they as raw as this? No. But if you want to check out the Blank Check and the Big Picture
and the Lynchpin podcast,
they're good. They're good podcasts. They are good.
I would say that this film is one of the greatest David Lynch films ever, but it's kind of one of his lesser Lynchian films.
Yeah, I mean this was an independent movie. It seems like in a lot of ways. But it has the feel of a studio movie, and it got the recognition of a studio movie. Because I think it was just a really low-budget studio movie.
He was given 4 scripts. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
So he was pitched the idea of directing a film, and there were 4 different ideas. And they said, all right, I'm going to list them out for you. The first one is called Elephant Man. He said, stop there. I'm directing that one. And he doesn't even know what the other 3 ideas are after that. Well, he's dead now, but he didn't know what those other 3 movies were. So he was sold on the idea since the word Elephant Man came out, because the Elephant Man is a widely known person. John Merrick was a real person, wasn't he? Or was that his actual name? I forget. But this guy was a real person, a medical anomaly, as they say. A man with tumors covering the orifices of 90% of his body. A man that had multiple extra...
Oh yeah,
how many?
There's a picture of him, and it actually does look very similar. I mean, it's not a 1-for-1. Obviously, the makeup they did the best they could, but I mean, relatively speaking, he did look like that.
And his name was Joseph Merrick, not John Merrick.
And Anthony Hopkins, he kind of looks like this Sir Frederick Treves guy, Dr. Treves.
Yeah.
So they didn't get it too far off. He had suspected Proteus syndrome, which is a rare genetic disorder. I will punt to the experts on
my
what
major
exactly
was in
that
genetics, and I've never heard that.
Yeah, I mean it says rare. So and then he did have a lot tumors covering his body. I mean, it's one thing to have I have a mole on my nose. I was thinking about this. I was like, that's a physical deformity, or it could be considered. But it's like not inhibiting my life in any way.
You're like the Princess and the Pea.
I'm like comparing myself to John Merrick. Like, oh man, my life is very.
Ben, you're my most beautiful in my best friend circles, you're my most beautiful best friend. You know that?
Really?
Yeah.
That means a lot, Zach.
Yeah. And you're saying that you're comparing yourself to Joseph Merrick right now.
Well, maybe that shines the light on everyone's body image issues these days.
Yes.
Because of social media.
Yes.
So everyone thinks that they look bad because they are comparing to themselves to edited photos of everyone that go around online.
These Instagram filters are changing the world. Do you know that? Natural selection has taken a completely different course since this started because people who are hideous can fish, and I don't mean with an F. I mean PHISH. And they can catfish. That one's with an F. And they can lie and
steal and cheat and
steal. Sure, I don't know.
Yeah,
steal the hearts, I guess.
But yeah, you're right. John Merrick, and there was a couple different books. One was by Frederick Treves. It was called The Elephant Man and Other Reminiscences. I can't say that word. Reminiscences. Why can I not say that?
Reminiscences.
Yeah, reminiscences.
No,
okay.
You added an N in there.
Sorry, I'm just not even going to attempt to say that. I can't say it right now. And then The Elephant Man, A Study in Human Dignity by Ashley Montague, which was much later written. It was written in 1971. Film was shot in black and white. Why do you think they shot it in black and white?
Well, I think obviously Eraserhead.
Yeah.
But I think to kind of capture the time, because it was the 20s, right? Early, or was it the 10s?
Yeah, I mean, it fit with and I think it has this kind of cold, dark, dreary energy to it. It's set in London. I've been there. It's a dark.
Really?
Well, actually, when I was there, it was beautiful.
Really?
But I hear most of the time it's cloudy and rainy.
There were two Big Bens over there.
There were. And we were together like once on
Really?
the trip. Or twice, maybe.
I think it's also black and white because, like
I'm so
you said,
sorry
it's
about
dreary.
the coughing, everyone.
I think it's more. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it, Ben, but I'm gonna go a little far out. Like, at the end of the day, we all bleed red, right? And at the end of the day, John Merrick's the same color as us.
True. That is one way to look at it. Also, I think with the makeup, the black and white probably worked better. Because do you imagine them trying to like color out, like, I feel like it maybe would have taken you out of it a little bit.
They might not have known what colors because he never had any real colored photos, did he?
No. That's a good point too. Yeah, he didn't have any colored photos.
Yeah.
They were all in black and white.
He could have been green.
That's true. Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, he could have been like discolor, whatever his original ethnicity was. Like, who knows?
Yeah. I have to imagine the reason is hidden in David Lynch's mind.
Probably
like
locked away in the vault.
Every other thing in all of his films. Ben, what was the meaning of this film? I'm going to get straight into the heart of it.
Oh, what's the line?
There's a line?
I am a human.
Okay.
Or no. I'm already messing up.
I'm not an animal.
I am not an animal. I am a human being. That's the meaning of the film.
That's a gut-wrenching scene.
Yeah, it is. It almost brought me to tears.
Yes. And that's the one that Sean Fennessy's dad quoted as Sean was a child.
And it's not like, I'm not trying to make a meme out of it. Like, it is a really powerful moment. Because this guy who's super mild-mannered has basically been pushed around, shoved around, treated like an animal his whole life. Finally stands up for himself. That's really powerful.
Yes.
But you also see that the power is not just in him standing up for himself, but that he starts to have other people stand up for him, including the doctor. And I think the second thing that you can learn from this movie, so obviously human empathy and just valuing human life and everyone equally in terms of their value of a human being. So there's no disease, deformity thing that makes you different that should devalue you to any point. Like, there should be this kind of general sense of value of life, right? Yeah. That's it seems like it should be a really basic, simple thing. But when you put yourself in the shoes of what it was probably like for John Merrick in the 1800s, early 1900s, whenever he lived. And people didn't have the internet. They didn't know that people with rare genetic disorders existed.
Yeah.
They weren't faced with these things quite as prominently. So you would be like scared, or I don't know, it's natural instinct to be scared of something that you don't understand.
Yeah.
Which he says. I think he says something like that.
Whether it's John Merrick or women, like, there's a fear of the unknown. And you're right. I think all the nurses in this film exemplify that well, where the first time they see him...
A nurse would not react like that.
You don't think so?
No.
You texted me that you don't like how this film represented nurses as you were watching it.
Yeah, because as a nurse, you expect to see things that are abnormal and people in very vulnerable positions.
But what is the range of abnormal? Like,
You're
what
right.
If it's
You're
way
right.
outside
Okay.
that?
But it's also a person by person experience. So it's just like this nurse reacted this way. The old lady nurse, she never did.
I'm not proud of how the doctor acted in this film.
That's a good point.
So I'm not saying representation is completely there. But like I don't think many doctors would do much differently than this guy. They might do worse.
Right. But I was getting to this,
All right,
and
sorry.
this always happens to me.
Go
I
ahead.
listen back to the podcast, and I'm like, I need to work on making a more concise point, because a lot of times...
Too many side trails.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll get halfway through my point, and then I'll get onto a different rabbit trail. But the rabbit trails are interesting, but...
You're doing
the
one
second, now. Yeah. The second point is what we learned from Anthony Hopkins' character, Dr. Treves, which is that sometimes in our attempts to be good, we do bad things. And we need to be aware of those.
What a very powerful point for doctors.
I'm not saying that, and perhaps he was being a little harsh on himself.
Yeah.
But you definitely do see the angle that this was a very beneficial thing for his career to have this empathy for this person. Like, there's something he could gain out of it.
And he does.
And he does. And he did, even as he's aware of it.
Yes.
So, I mean, it doesn't... I think ultimately he did a good thing, because this guy had no one. John Merrick had nobody, and he gave him somebody that he could rely on. But even then, he didn't protect him fully.
Yeah.
From people taking advantage of him.
No.
And he put him in bad positions.
Yeah.
So, like, in his attempt to do something good, he still messed up, and he still sometimes did the wrong thing.
Yeah. And that's a great lesson. And I think there was this one scene at the beginning of the film where he was at not the petting zoo, the human zoo, whatever, the freak show. And he said, "All right, now turn around, let's see the back." And he did this. The doctor did the same thing when he was showing all of his doctor friends, right? He was showing the academic societies. He was like, "All right, turn around." They expose his genitals. They, are looking at him, touching him, poking him, keeping him in a place. They never asked him to go to these places, right? They just kind of told him and picked him up. It's crazy that it took like a whole day for him to find out if he had any like mental capacity. Like, nobody tried talking to him.
They just assumed that because of his physical deformity, he had mental...
He said he's a complete idiot. And it's just like, but if then he goes, and it takes him less than 30 seconds to find out that John Merrick can talk. And it's like, nobody tried. And of course, John Merrick's not going to like come out and speak. He's like never been given permission. And yeah, this film it's sad. It's a very sad film. I think I was sad for most of the film because you're kind of cringing in a lot of parts where people are mistreating him. But then you also understand that, like, there is an element of, I don't even know how to put this. I'll just describe the scene when John Merrick goes to the doctor in his wife's house, and the first time a woman is ever nice to him and talks to him, he just breaks down and starts crying because someone so beautiful like his mom is talking to him, and it's never happened to him before. And you have to imagine these people exist, people that have been mistreated their entire lives, whether they were born into an oppressive situation, born into something like that, or just literally have deformities or abnormalities like John Merrick. You could think of so many different diseases, abnormalities, afflictions, persecutions that could cause a situation like this where nobody, where someone is not treated well for most of their life, and then they finally get that recognition. They finally get that treatment. And what else can you do but cry for John Merrick? And I think it was a beautiful scene. And it just shows David Lynch's sweet side. His beautiful, underlying, sweetheart side. And we talked about this in Wild at Heart a little bit, where David Lynch does a lot of dark things. He does a lot of raw, visceral feeling reactions. He talks about trauma all the time. And this is also a movie about trauma. But then David Lynch has these scenes that are so wonderful. And there's another one in The Straight Story. Have you seen The Straight Story?
No, that's the last one that I have to watch.
There's a couple of them in there. And there are a couple of them in most of the films he makes, where it's just so sweet and so wonderful. And that scene where he breaks down in front of the doctor's wife, I mean, that was the most powerful scene for me, along with I'm Not an Animal. And I agree with you, Ben. I think that is the theme of the story, kind of. One, from John Merrick's side, like, these people exist. Like, there are injustices in the world. That's the world we live in. And two, that John Merrick, or what's Dr.
Treves.
Treves? Is that what you said?
Treves, yeah.
Treves. Dr. Treves is a good example of what not to do, but then he also kind of learns from his mistakes.
Yeah, I feel like he's the he's not a villain, but he's not as much of the hero as maybe you initially expect him to be.
No.
But he is Anthony Hopkins, so you're like, oh wow, it's Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole movie. I was like, oh, it's Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, he's a good-looking guy.
Yeah, and it's young Anthony Hopkins. I'm used to seeing him, as Hannibal Lecter.
We used to see him as Odin.
Or like an old guy.
Yeah.
But
Thor's dad.
I forgot that he played it.
Yeah, I know. Everybody forgets that.
You're like, oh my, like he's in Marvel?
Yeah.
Sir Anthony Hopkins of all people?
Can I, real quick, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
John Hurt, the first time I ever watched anything with him in it was Doctor Who.
Okay.
He played the War Doctor, which is a secret doctor between the 11th and 12th Doctors. Or maybe it's the 10th and 11th Doctors. And it was like the big 50th anniversary for the Doctor Who. It was a big movie that came out. And I remember when they announced John Hurt is playing the War Doctor, which is like the secret doctor that they've been theorizing has been happening for decades. They've been theorizing about this doctor. And I was like, who is John Hurt? This old man's going to play the war, because usually the doctors are younger now. They kept making him younger as the series went on, and he killed it in the role. And I loved him after that.
He is also considered like Anthony Hopkins is considered one of the greatest English actors, but John Hurt is also considered one.
Yeah.
Which is, I wasn't as familiar with John Hurt. I'm sure I've seen him in stuff.
And he passed away a few years ago, I think.
Yeah. But Lynch actually called him simply the greatest actor in the world. Like, it's on his Wikipedia page,
wow.
Like right at the top, David Lynch, greatest actor in the world. He loved John Hurt. And it's interesting. He got a lot of recognition for this performance, which is interesting to me because he's so removed from, like, you can't, and maybe this goes back to, this is how we should judge actors, but he's so removed from the role, and he's very soft-spoken most of the movie, and he has to do, like, his mannerisms are pretty understated.
Yeah.
So it's like, sometimes you think of good acting being, like, over the top, like, how, like, I love Willem Dafoe, like we talked about in the last episode, and a lot of times he can go, like, push every button.
Yes.
But sometimes good acting is, like, reining everything in.
Yes.
So that way when you have that moment
with
that line, it's that much more powerful.
Yes.
So that's what I forget about acting sometimes, is that it's sometimes about the whole range. It's not just about dialing everything to 100 all the time.
Yes. Not everything is 0 to 100 that quickly. You're definitely right. And I think the best part about Hurt's performance kind of was those simple, quiet moments. I think of the scene with the head doctor, right, of the hospital, and he comes in, and John Merrick gets a little bit nervous, and he starts, like, repeating things, and it's just like, it looked like a real guy in a real situation. If I didn't know that was John Hurt, like, there's no way I would have known that was John Hurt. Like, he was in a different, obviously he didn't look like himself, but he was completely acting like someone who would be nervous, who has never talked to anybody before, would act like. And how can you even comprehend what that would feel like? Or, you know, if you're a method actor, like how could you even get to that point mentally, you know? So I see where Lynch is coming from. And then when he starts to gain more confidence throughout the film, he has to change that acting, right? He's like adding an element in every single scene that passes by until the end when, like, even when he says, I'm not an animal, it's hard for him to get that out. He can't pronounce everything right, but also, like, it's hard for him to say it. And you can tell in the way that he says it, like, he's not super confident in the way that he says it. And that's like an extra layer of acting, and I found it beautiful, and it was great. And then Hopkins, I thought he did well too. I feel like there wasn't much that was asked of him in this performance, to be honest.
No, it was just to be like a real straight.
That's what doctors
characters
are. They don't have a lot of, you know,
he didn't
qualities.
have to be. Yeah, he didn't have to do anything insane. I mean, if you're like, oh yeah, this guy's gonna be like a crazy serial killer in 10 years, you would maybe not believe it, but
yeah,
because it's only 11 years from this movie that he's Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs.
But you can kind of you can kind of see it.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it that it could come to be. Another thing I really like about this movie is like the universal application of it. So you could like you said, it doesn't just have to be like this, like this is a very special circumstance, the Elephant Man.
Yeah.
You know, not many people experience this much body deformity, but you could insert anybody into this situation, and it would be the same story essentially.
Yeah.
So they use I don't want to say hyperbole because it was a real, like, this actually happened to someone, but they take this specific circumstance to make the point, like the cinematic point that you can apply to the rest of your life.
I just thought of a new list we should do for Last Resort Network YouTube channel.
What?
Top 5 films that medical professionals must watch before entering. And this should be on it.
Yeah, I think Elephant Man should be on it.
Because this just gets at the point of, like, is he more than just a condition? He doesn't really, if he doesn't talk, if he doesn't have a personality, because he hasn't had an opportunity to form that, right? And all that he has existed for, the only purpose that he served in life, outside of his mom's love for him, if it's just being a freak, if it's just being an abnormality, then people are only going to see that, right? But it takes spending time with these people to get to know them, for their humanity to kind of come out, and for you to honestly fall in love with them. That's what happened to the nurses. Like I said, you said it might be a bad representation. I think it's accurate because I think humanity is just like that.
Right. It's not specifically the role. It's just that would be how somebody would react given the situation.
And again, like, I'll be honest, you're in an ICU, you're seeing crazier things, you know what I mean? Stuff like, but if I, you know, this is a great lesson for medical professionals, but also for anyone in general, to not just treat them as, like, I guess a patient, but a human, Ben. And these are like the motivational posters that are around a lot of these offices that I work around. But yeah, and you get to know them, you spend time with them, and that's when they become human to you. And that's what happens with the nurses. Like, they scream at first, but then they love them at the end. The head nurse kind of was screaming. Would she be like a nurse practitioner?
Maybe, or like a charge nurse. That's how I imagine
charge nurse. That's probably for the floor, and there's one floor. And
nursing I think was a lot different back then.
There were less regulations.
There was it was less defined.
Drink this mercury.
Differently defined role maybe than it is now.
That's fair. And at the end, she's like advocating for him, right?
Right.
So that
Which
was
that's an accurate representation. Of
anything good is accurate. Yep. Yep. And anything bad is inaccurate.
No. Yeah. The advocacy. Yeah, we are patient advocates. You know?
Maybe it's what a nurse should be. The ideal nurse. But, like, she's like, people are just coming in and watching him. He's still a freak show. It's no different. And and she's right. And she was advocating for him. But that took time because at first she didn't want to help him. She didn't think of him as a human. And it's sad. So it asks a lot of questions, big questions, like, what is humanity? You know, at what point is a human, and what point does a human have value? And this film kind of pushes those boundaries to say, like, it's not our choice. It's not our decision to make we don't have that decision to be like, a human is less because of this, or a human is less because of that, you know?
Right.
No matter what.
Here's a question.
Okay.
Who produced this movie?
Steven Spielberg.
Close.
I'm joking.
So it's somebody you would maybe not expect
Okay.
to have produced.
So it's
this
not Mark
movie.
Frost.
But it's somebody you probably would have heard of. It's not Mark Frost. I'll just say it because I don't know that you'll get to it. It's Mel Brooks.
Oh, yeah. I actually did know that.
So Mel Brooks, of course, is known for comedies, right? And he made that one Western one. Now all of his movies are disappearing from my head. Spaceballs. He did Spaceballs.
Is that the Western one?
That was not the Western one. But he did Spaceballs. And those are the kind of parody movies were kind of his thing. And he wanted to produce this, but he did not want his name associated with it because he didn't want people to think, Mel Brooks, the Elephant Man, ha ha. Like, we're going to be, like, imagine that. But
I didn't even think of that.
So he was, give credit to Mel Brooks. He's very thoughtful. I mean, the first producer, Jonathan Sanger, was he was the main like hands-on producer. He had approached Lynch about the movie, and then I think Brooks came alongside to help with funding. I don't know why lately I've been diving more into the production side of things, but
it's interesting.
It is interesting to see how these things come together when you realize like it's all a business. So it's one thing to be like David Lynch, amazing auteur, but at this point, all he had done is made Eraserhead, which is like a weird. It had a success.
Was that 79?
77.
77.
So 3 years before.
Sorry, it has a weird.
It had success commercially as a midnight movie, so it would play like at late night theaters, and it had a really long,
that would be so fun,
extended run.
Yeah,
and it was successful, especially for essentially student film like that he had filmed on weekends and just pulled together funding. And so this is his first shot at something that's like real. So it makes sense. It's very straightforward, right? You have to prove that you can actually like make a legitimate studio like film a lot of times before you're allowed to just do whatever you want. Especially if you go back in time. Like maybe now you're like, well, Wes Anderson, he got to make a bottle rocket and then he got to, do whatever he wanted for 25 years. But usually there's some level of, prove that you can make something commercially viable, and then we'll keep letting you do
we
your
talked
own
about
thing.
this a lot. Like Paul Thomas Anderson had to do it a little bit, and then Lynch kind of goes back to it with the Straight Story with Disney.
If you want your you need instant success like Pulp Fiction, like Reservoir Dogs. If you want to have that whole career that's just like I'm doing all movies that I want to do.
Yeah.
You need to have instant success.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you got to make some movies that are like you're making them more to please the studio, and then gradually they give you more freedom, hopefully. Yeah. Or you just become a studio director, which is fine. That's a good career, I'm sure.
Yeah, or you're David Lynch and you don't really associate with a studio or anything. You just kind of have really good connections with different people.
Right. And I think that's a good distinction because he made this movie because he really wanted to. I don't think David Lynch would have made a movie because he didn't want to.
No, he just randomly heard the name Elephant Man and said, "I'll do it."
Yeah.
Right? And he probably knew the story beforehand, but that just shows David Lynch like he's just a wonderful director to be able to have the range of directing that he has. To go from the Elephant Man, from Eraserhead to the Elephant Man, which is so much more tame than his first film. Like usually they go from really tame films to some crazy films later on. I said crazy word. But this time he starts out with like the most Lynchian film that you can get, one of them, going to like a very sweet, normal, non-baby bloody film.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Which is like, it has two surreal moments in there at like the start and the end.
But they're related to the story.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the very like most normal way you could use surreal filmmaking.
Yes. Because it's an elephant. It's just elephants roaming and...
Yeah, and then the end is like him connecting with his mother in some sort of... And it's very brief. Yeah. So like, there's not like this... that you could... yeah. You could make this a version of this movie that has like surreal elements, I'm sure.
Sure. Yeah.
But he did not.
Yeah.
Or he wasn't probably allowed to. That wasn't in the script. And he didn't go off the script. So as far as what this tells you about Lynch, it just tells you, he's somebody that everyone likes. So I think that's, again, don't burn your bridges.
Yeah. That's
a good point. Work well with everyone that you work with. That's a good lesson to take anywhere that you go. It's best to try to maintain good relationships with everyone because you never know. And just because, like we learned in this movie, you should just, you should learn to treat everyone well and with dignity.
Well, Bible says, try to live peaceably with all people at all times.
Right.
So hopefully he did that.
And so, and it was made on a modest $5 million budget. And
That's very
it
cheap.
grossed 26, so it did pretty good. And it was nominated for 8 Oscars.
Oh my gosh.
John Hurt nominated for
that.
Best Actor.
Okay.
David Lynch, Best Director.
Okay.
Um,
Anything won? I'm assuming not. Otherwise, you would have said that.
I don't know that it's not entirely clear on. Let's see the accolades. There was another big movie that year. Oh, Raging Bull was out that year,
which you've also reviewed. So go check that out.
So I think it may have lost. What year was this? I hate when they don't.
1980. But yeah,
I hate when they don't link. Would that be the 1981 Oscars then? Is that how that works?
Yeah, it comes out the next year.
Because it's the next year. So let's see. 53rd Oscar. And Best Picture did not go to Elephant Man. It went to Ordinary People, a movie that everyone talks about. No. And Robert Redford won Best Director too for Ordinary People. This is probably one that people are like, why did Scorsese not win this year? Because remember, Scorsese didn't win until 2006 with The Departed, which I think is like kind of an overrated movie. But he won the Oscar, which he deserved. And John Hurt lost to Robert De Niro.
And Raging Bull. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I've never watched Ordinary People, so I can't say, but like it's not shocking that it's crazy that it looks like it was somehow it didn't win Best Costume Design. It's like, what in the world? So yeah, it won nothing. But it was
I get you a cough drop.
Yeah, I know. It was like as soon as we turned the mics on,
Yeah.
that's when I started coughing.
Interesting.
I wasn't coughing before that.
Interesting.
So sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
Deepest, most sincere apologies.
Yeah.
And I will keep coughing probably.
I will say the nice part about this film compared to David Lynch's other films is it makes sense. It's a linear story. There's no levels of dreams to interpret. There are no characters who are fake or just imaginary. It's just the story. And again, this is probably the film where David Lynch most strictly takes from his source material and doesn't like twist it or, you know what I mean?
Possibly Dune, but
yeah,
maybe to a fault with Dune.
But he changes a lot in that Dune, is what I hear. I haven't read. You've read the book.
I mean, yeah, we'll see. He probably had to because he had to make a 600-page book into a 2-hour movie. So I'm sure he does change things.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, like, how accurate this film is to the story of Joseph Merrick.
I mean, it's probably very movie, like, cinematic, but hopefully his life was better. That's like, I guess we should hope that John Merrick's life was better than portrayed, but somehow I feel like it probably wasn't.
Does Lynch kind of display Merrick's pain and trauma well in this film? Or does it kind of focus more on the 3,000-foot story?
It doesn't, I guess it doesn't dwell in his suffering too much. Actually, it does a good job of showing Merrick's, like, the good qualities of Merrick, which is that he's very quick to forgive and move on and be thankful for the good things that happen to him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He doesn't spend a lot of time being like holding grudges against, like, he understands what the people are doing to him are wrong, and maybe he does have to learn to stand up for himself and not let them do that. But he also, when he does finally have a good group of people surrounding him, he focuses more on being thankful that he does have those people than like being upset at how he was mistreated before.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really good quality in life. Like, it doesn't mean you should just be like necessarily like push aside and like pretend like those things didn't happen. But it is healthier to, generally speaking, like practice gratitude
Yeah.
versus, and definitely like holding grudges never gets you anywhere in life.
No, for sure. And I wonder how much of this film and his attitude comes out of that psalm that he said, Psalm 23. You know, like, I shall not want, you know?
Or like, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
He doesn't fear evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is an element of, well, you know, maybe he's a Christian, we don't know. But also, like, there is a lot of that psalm in the way that he interacts with people. And I don't know if that's what Joseph Merrick was like, or if David Lynch just kind of uses that as like a representation of a good mindset to have. Which, again, like, we've never heard David Lynch quote the Bible like in his films before, but maybe that's just a representation. Kind of like, it reminds me of Quentin Tarantino's fake verse from Ezekiel in Pulp Fiction, where it's like, that's just like an idea of good. It doesn't actually represent what the Bible says. But I feel like this passage that Merrick has memorized really represents how he interacts with the doctors, how he interacts with the nurses and the freak show attendees and the freak show people who ran it. And he's kind of inspiring. You know, it's crazy that people who come from really low positions can become like the most inspiring people. And I'm not even just talking about Joseph Merrick or John Merrick. I'm talking about like just in life, like people who have suffered through these things, people who have been mistreated, who have had no one and still act right, still like do good things, I guess, become the most inspiring. And it's like, how can someone who would typically be thought of as trash, as nothing, become so valuable so instantly? Right when that actress came and started interacting with John Merrick, like all of a sudden he became famous, right? People knew that there's merit to him, right? That he's like a good guy. They still looked at him like he's a guy in a zoo, right? Some of them would come in and disrespect him and hurt him, right? And steal from him or whatever. But they knew like deep down that like he's a good guy. And that came way later on. But like instantly, once that was noticed, he became like an inspiring person. You know? And that's not really a takeaway from this film. That's just kind of a takeaway in life.
Right.
That like, even if nobody's watching the suffering that you're going through, one, God sees it, but also like one day it could be used for something awesome. Like John Merrick.
You know who disagrees with you about this?
Is it Mr. Roger Ebert?
Yeah. He hated Lynch even in his most normal element.
Really?
He gave this movie 2 out of 4. And he said...
That's not bad.
That's kind of bad, though, for Roger Ebert.
Okay.
I mean, he gave Wild at Heart 2.5 out of 4, and he hated Wild at Heart.
Interesting.
He said, I kept asking myself what this film was trying to say about the human condition as reflected by John Merrick, and I kept drawing blanks. Well, maybe, Mr. Ebert, you need to grow a heart. Because, I don't know, how do you draw blanks from this? I mean, I agree it's not like... It may not be profound in the sense that it's making you think about something you've never thought about before.
Sure.
But, as we've said before, many things in life we need to be reminded about over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the most important things.
Yes.
Because we're kind of stupid. We are stupid.
Roger's like, good is good, bad is bad. Memorized, we're done.
Yeah.
Never need to talk about it.
We don't need to talk about it. We should already know this. We don't need to talk about this.
Yeah. And
I disagree.
You know, we say this every time, but, you know, I don't always agree with Roger Ebert. So there's that. But I still respect him. And Roger Ebert went through tough times too.
That's true.
He had mouth cancer.
He did go through tough times.
Yeah.
So we won't be too harsh on him.
Yeah.
I like that the feud between Lynch and Ebert is fascinating.
Why did John Merrick sleep like a regular person?
Because he could.
Okay.
Like
he knew it would cause his end.
Oh wait. So he's did I miss this?
That's at the end.
So at the end he sleeps like a regular person and he's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
How did that slip past me?
Well, they talk about if he said it in the film, if he lays down, he will die. Because the weight and the pressure of his head will kill him.
He wants to go be with his mom. That's the only thing I can think
Well,
of.
that's why the end scene happened and he went with his mom.
Is that a good thing? That's kind of... I don't know if that puts a bad taste in my mouth on the ending of the movie.
I don't know.
But is that actually what happened? Because it is a biopic.
Well, so he's dead. But in the film, people have different theories. One of them, Ben, is he thought he could do it and survive. Like, because his life had kind of, like, the quality of life has gotten better. So he thought, like, life was granting him success so he could sleep normally. Like, it was like a mental thing. The other theory is he wanted to die. And then the other theory is he forgot.
Well, it's hard to imagine that he wants to die because it seems like he hasn't. Oddly enough, he doesn't seem like an overly depressed person.
No, and it seems like he only started to value his life at the end of the film.
Right. So it doesn't. So I feel like that theory doesn't make sense. He doesn't seem like he seems like a very intelligent person. He wouldn't be forgetful. So maybe he does get a little overconfident.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
I'm thinking he knew, this
I
might
just feel
sound wrong
dumb for missing that.
Well, it might be. Yeah, well, don't feel dumb, Ben. I forgive you.
Just like
John
Merrick.
Merrick. Just like John Merrick. But I think it could be that he did it intentionally. That's my view. But not out of a depressed manner or anything like that or wanting to leave. Just kind of like he had finally experienced what it was like to be a real person. And he wanted to do it to its fullest, which meant sleeping for once on his back.
Right. Do you think that it was inevitable that he was going to pass away from some sort of...
To have tumors cover 90% of your body.
That's
Most medical
like, even if it wasn't,
say, yeah.
if he didn't do that, you feel like it would have been something that would have happened.
Now, the government says I'm not legally allowed to have a medical opinion, even on dead people from the past. But I would say it's probably pretty certain that he wasn't expected to have a long life.
Right. He probably had a longer life than expected already.
Yeah.
So
now, but nobody checked.
So that's where I would like maybe put it in a different category than somebody like jumping off of a building.
No, I think it's different. Yeah. I think there was also a part of it where he might not have thought that he died because he probably hadn't ever tried it. You know, obviously if he's not dead, then he hasn't tried it, right? It's like, I'm allergic to eggs. Oh, really? What happens when you try eggs? Well, I haven't had it. Well, then do you really know?
Right.
Like, or did someone just poke your back and tell you? You know, so I think that's more of an experiential thing. And for John Merrick, it was, I want to finally live as a real human. I have so much respect for my life now. And again, we would disagree with the methods of his reaction to how he values his life. But his reaction to his newfound value of life is, I'm going to do what a normal person does when they sleep. That's my view. Because that's a happy view.
I could agree with that. And I would say the overall tone of the movie points to it being a happy view and not some sort of like tragedy at the end.
Sure, but then I wouldn't put it past Lynch.
That's true.
Yeah.
Maybe he was trying to slip some darkness in there.
Yeah.
To us.
Yeah, kind of like everything's going really well, but he still wanted to end it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a theory, but I don't think so because David Lynch tells his stories thematically, right? He switches plot lines, he switches characters, he switches logic, right?
Right.
But he doesn't switch his themes.
No, he doesn't.
His themes are very modern.
Yeah.
Even if everything else is post.
He's one of the pioneers of theme-based cinema.
Yeah.
Like, movies should be about the feelings that they evoke in the viewer and not primarily, like, not the other way around. Like, not, we're creating these situations and now you have the feelings. No, we start with the feelings and then that creates the vision of what happens.
Sure.
Which is why they get so weird and out there.
Yeah.
Because they're just like vignettes in the later movies. Not the Elephant Man's a poor example.
You think of Inland Empire as
or like vignettes of like things that are like evoking feelings. Like and that's why that's why all the characters become so like distinct and like they hold your attention. And even, I mean, I'm saying that, but like the Elephant Man, the characters do that too.
Yes.
In a different way than maybe the other Lynch movies, but he still has that in the movie.
Yeah. And David Lynch doesn't preach in his movies. He doesn't preach lessons, and that's a very postmodern thing. But if you look below the layers, David Lynch always has some type of message, but it's through exposure. It's through letting you experience what people feel who go through certain situations, and that should teach you a lesson. We talked about in Wild at Heart that the exposure of the audience watching that film, to the trauma experienced by girls who experience violence, that tells you a story. That teaches you a lesson. Now, there's no one in the movie that says, oh, the lesson of this movie is blah, blah, blah. Similar in this film, this just kind of tells the story and shows us the trauma of John Merrick and his inevitable end, unfortunately. And the lesson that we learn is through us experiencing that with him. And yes, you could say many filmmakers give the lesson through the plot, the story, the themes of the film. But David Lynch does it in a much more potent way. He does it in a way where it's like, the movie doesn't even have to make sense. In this case, it does. But the movie doesn't even have to make sense. And the themes are there. They connect well. And they tell you a story through the themes. And it's almost like this this is hard to explain, but it's almost like this meta layer of... It's almost like, Ben, it's almost like the regular layer that we see doesn't make sense, but the meta layer of themes makes sense. And like we're supposed to follow that train, like this ethereal train that isn't presented on the screen but in our minds. And then maybe when we watch David Lynch films, we accidentally transcendental meditate.
Maybe.
And that's bad if so. and we're following these like thoughts that are kind of like loosely logical. And then we learn a lesson from that because those are the experiences that people in those situations feel. This film isn't that so much, but that's kind of what David does. And it's wonderful. And that's why I love him so much. And he might be my favorite director.
Well, I was talking with someone earlier today about, and somehow I had come up like, why isn't it important to engage with fiction? I think some people are push back and are like, no, you should just read, nonfiction informational stuff. And it's because of that, your experience, you're like placing yourself in someone else's life. I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before.
Yes.
And David Lynch perhaps takes that and pushes it to another level.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a different way of experiencing people's experiences.
Yes,
it's
you're
like
definitely
spliced up and in a new vision.
Yes.
So, which gives you another new perspective to look at.
And then sometimes he'll just add random things that are going on in his own personal life.
Right.
But I appreciate this film because he doesn't necessarily do that. He kind of sticks to the script in some sort. So this is probably going to be the episode that makes the most sense to anybody listening out of the David Lynch series besides The Straight Story. Everything else, if you've already listened to our Inland Empire movie review, I'm sorry.
Even our Eraserhead one, I'm like, if we went back, which there's no reason to, but if we went back and did it, I feel like we would have a whole new level of this is our new theory on what we think this is about. And like I had kind of said on the last episode, I think it's just basically about his life, which we may have said on but I don't think I was quite there in my understanding of David Lynch and how he functioned.
And neither was I.
Now that we are there, it's a little bit easier to say, but Inland Empire, our guess is probably as good as anyone's. So, because it's so interesting and unique and unknowable. It's unknowable what it's about. I think intentionally.
Yeah.
Because that's not the point.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I'm not sure I have anything else about this film. I think I gave it 4 stars.
On a gut, I gave it 4.5. It might be more like a 4-star movie, really,
okay.
But I felt it was really powerful. I'd be curious where it'll stack up with. It's definitely a less like problematic. I wouldn't necessarily say Lynch movies are problematic, but from like just like able to turn it on and show it to anyone type of thing.
Yeah,
it's one of the best David Lynch movies for that.
Yes.
So it makes it a little easier to like recommend and things to people.
I would 100% agree. Well, Ben, do you have any last thoughts on this film before movie highlights?
No. It's a good movie. You should watch it. Don't get confused with the 1982 TV movie version that is on Tubi.
We love Tubi.
But Tubi does not have the David Lynch version. And in fact, the David Lynch version, as I found, is actually kind of hard to find, not on physical media. The way I watched it was on Internet Archive, which is
Okay.
not it's not the best version because in some instances the dialogue doesn't quite line up with people's lips, but then sometimes it does,
Yeah.
which is weird. But it was passable. But if you want the best experience, probably buy the Criterion.
You just gotta turn the volume off, put the subtitles on, and see if those match.
Well, there's no subtitles on Internet Archive, so
okay, never mind.
don't have to worry about that.
Then turn on the automatic subtitles on your computer.
But it is nice that somebody was kind enough to do that because I didn't have time to go hunt down a DVD copy of this movie today. So
I need to get you on my downloader that I don't use.
yeah, that we would
legally.
never. Nobody should ever do anything like that.
Yeah,
We
that's
wouldn't.
illegal.
Why would we?
I would never do that. Anyway,
Then yeah.
you've
okay.
watched a lot of films recently.
Which it was like I hadn't, and then I watched a bunch. So
What do you got?
Got some time. So I watched. This movie was called Confidential Report on Max. Come to find out, there were 2 versions on Max. I didn't know this. One was called Mr. Arkadin, and the other one's called Confidential Report. Confidential Report is the longer of the 2 by like 7 minutes, but Mr. Arkadin is the more well-known cut, I think.
Okay.
And it's the one that if this happens, they usually only have 1 on Letterboxd, and they'll be like, there's alternate titles.
Yeah.
So I logged as Mr. Arkadin. I watched the alternate or the Confidential Report version, but it's an Orson Welles movie. I don't know why it got this many edits exactly. I didn't look that much into the history, but it's about this rich guy and this young aspiring fellow who tries to play this rich guy and get something out of it. And it's interesting. It's good. It's centered in Europe, and there's some weird cult-like imagery in it. It's really fascinating movie. So I definitely recommend. It kind of lost me a little bit at the end, but it was good. Then Death Race 2000, well-known racing exploitation movie from the 70s. The premise is there is a race in the future of America, which at this point was 2000. And it's a transcontinental race, and you get points for killing people, and you get more points for killing babies and women.
Okay.
So and then they have to then there's a group of people who are trying to stop this form of government where it's basically like gladiator style. And Sylvester Stallone is in it. So
cool. That's great.
This is like pre-Rocky.
You didn't have me until he came in. It's funny that we were born after the date that they say is the future.
Yes, and the future was fortunately not like it's presented in this movie.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of Mad Max, which Mad Max was made after this, so maybe it had some influence just with the racing and the dystopian thing.
It's always
a cool
funny
movie.
how quickly people think our society would evolve technologically.
Yeah.
You know, like the movie, I don't know. I even think of the movie 2012. It's like, this is going to happen by this time. I guess it's more Aztec calendar based, but I don't know. What would be another, like even Back to the Future, wasn't it 2015 or something where it was based?
But it's usually like it evolves in certain ways, but then they never imagine like the internet, or
Sure.
like the like truly transformational things never get
But
imagined.
like our hoverboards are, I saw this meme. It was like what they thought the hoverboard would be and what ours are, and they're like 2 wheels.
Yeah, it's like not hovering at all.
And why do we call them hoverboards, by the way? They're just wheels.
Yeah.
Nothing is hovering. Nothing.
Yeah, nothing
It's
is hovering.
disappointing. Sorry, keep going.
Then I watched. I'm trying to do a project on Willem Dafoe, so I watched his first 2 movies that he was in, The Loveless and Roadhouse 66. He plays like kind of a greaser, low life character in both of them, and he's good. His acting kind of evolves from the first to the second movie. I would say The Loveless is a little bit better than Roadhouse 66 as a movie, but neither are like amazing movies. But you can start to see Dafoe come into his own, and like there's a little bit of bits of promise to where he would go in the future. But they're just low budget movies. So at the end of the day, Catherine Bigelow, who directed Point Break and some other movies, she co-directed The Loveless. It was her
cool.
debut.
I respect her. I like her. Because Point Break was on my last.
All right, I need to stop talking before I cough more.
Yeah, you're gonna die right here.
Yeah.
You got more films?
No, that's it.
I only watched one film, but it became one of my all-time favorite films. It's called Picnic. It is. Let me get. Sorry, I had information up about it. I'm getting it up right now. I have it right here. 1996, directed by Shunji Iwai. It is a Japanese horror film, but it's not actually classified as horror. It's actually psychological drama and thriller, sort of. And it's about these 3 mental patients, and they go on a journey because they think the world is ending. It's only 72 minutes, a beautifully timed film, and the pacing is perfect. The imagery, Ben, is absolutely incredible. I gave it 5 stars and a heart on Letterboxd. That's how much I loved it, Ben. Now, its average on Letterboxd is 3.8, but it only has about 3,000 reviews on Letterboxd, so it's not a widely known film.
Yeah, that's definitely not super well known.
But I'll tell you, I loved it. It might be my 3rd favorite film. If not, it's in the top 5. If not, it's definitely 100% in the top 10. So I don't recommend it to most people. I think it's a very dark film. It deals with a lot of dark subjects. There's no nudity, but there are some inappropriate parts. And I would say, yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. But if you can watch it and get through it without turning it off, which about only a third of the human race can do, I mean, it'll gut punch you. It'll take you places. It'll make you feel new feelings. And I'm overhyping it. I already know it. But
I'm excited now.
Yeah, I told you that you can't watch it without me because I want to see what you think of it. But it's just beautiful imagery. And it's a lot about religion. There's a lot of Bible in this movie. Now, it's a dark film, so like obviously they're not taking notes from the Bible when they make the script, but there's a lot of Bible, and it talks about like light and darkness, and the characters represent those ideas, and it's very, very wonderful. So don't watch the movie, but appreciate it for my words that I give you today. So yeah. That's the only film I watched. I'm in the middle of a few other films. I'm actually writing a script for a new video coming up, so be sure to subscribe to the Last Resort Network on YouTube.
We're really going for it, guys.
Yeah, and we want to get to 50 subscribers so I can start doing my study streams.
That would be really helpful to Zach.
Yeah.
So help him out.
I want that accountability of that one person that logs in for 1 minute at one time, and that'll keep me accountable for at least a year. So I want to be like my hero. My study hero is Enrico Vincente, who was an Italian student who went to Harvard for his graduate studies in, I think it was engineering or something like that. He does study streaming. Again, we don't want to hoard all the viewers. We love when you guys go explore other people. So Enrico Vincent, he's a really good study streamer. He does 12 hours a day. He's insane. He did it for years, multiple years of 12 hours a day studying almost every single day. Just a champ of the study world, okay? Just a champ. Deserved every grade he got, which are A+, and A+, and A+. So go check him out. But then check me out when I study, 6 hours a day or something like that. In a row, maybe I'll do 2 of those a day. We'll figure it out. I've studied for 12 hours a day. I've studied for 48 hours when I did my cardiopulmonary.
In one day. Can you believe that?
In one day. Straight, though. I didn't sleep. I stayed at one desk for 48 hours. You can ask my old roommate. And that's the longest I've ever done. I'll hopefully never do that again. Anyway, so we love David Lynch. Please tune in for our next episode of the Movie Vault. And with that, Ben, do you have anything else?
If you want to protect your massive collection of physical media that you have, your DVDs, your Blu-rays, you need to call Hedman Anglin Agency. So contact them at 614-486-7300. 614-486-7300.
And tell them that Ben and Zach sent you.
Or you can email them at service@hedmananglinagency.com.
And they've been popping off. They've had multiple people come from our podcast and go get insurance through them, including myself.
Thank you for all of you listeners who have reached out to them and also have mentioned that you heard it from the podcast. We appreciate that.
Yeah, we need to give prizes to some of these people. I think we promised them for years, and we never did.
We're really not good at we're an example of how humans fall short.
Yes.
So Anyway, time to go back at the vault.
We won't explore that thought.
All right. I'll close the vault. In heaven.
It's not even the right movie.
Yeah.